Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very exciting live stream. We're going to talk about Figma MCP and OpenAI Codex. Welcome, everyone. Tell us in the chat where you like tuning in from. We are actually quite interested. Where for some of us here, like it's morning. For some of you, might be afternoon, evening. So let us know. And I guess we can start with this. So first of all, let's do just a bit of housekeeping. So this session is recorded, by the way, so will be emailed to you if you're registered. So we have a chat, and you can actually chat to everyone, and you can share, like during this live stream what you're thinking about. But also we have a specific like Q&A like button. So if you want to ask a specific question, please use the button, and question will be answered during the live stream. But also at the end, we will have a bit of actually Q&A space. So some of your questions will be answered live by us. And last but not least, be kind. We have a code of conduct that you should follow. So you can see the link there. But yeah, be kind to each other, and let's just enjoy this. So let's introduce ourselves. So let's start first with Roman. Roman, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. Super excited to be here. I lead developer experience at OpenAI, and as such, I spend a lot of my time thinking about how do we empower developers, and especially with Codex, our suite of coding tools. There's been a lot of progress on coding models since the summer with GPT-5 and now GPT-5.2 even as of yesterday. So super jazzed about telling you more about Codex, but also how does that plug into Figma? And so we'll dive into that. Thank you for having me, Ricardo.
Pleasure. And yeah, I'm Ricardo. I'm a developer advocate at Figma, and advocates at Figma are actually practitioners that help Figma users to make the most of the tools. And specifically, I'm a developer advocate, and I focus mainly on our like dev tools that we have Figma, from Dev Mode to Code Connect to MCP. And yeah, very excited to be here with you, Roman, especially the day after you launch like 5.2. So very exciting to also show to everyone else here like what we prepare for them. So let's cover quickly the agenda and how the live stream is going to kind of like be structured today. So we're going to do a very quick intro to Figma MCP and Codex. Then the most exciting part, we're going to do like a live demo, and we're going to show you how you can leverage both of those tools to actually build very good products. And we're going to close with some practical tips. And then, as I was saying, we're going to have like some space and some time for Q&A. So prepare your questions, and some of them will be answered live by me and Roman. So let's do a bit of intro, and I'm going to talk about Figma MCP. So we all know that authoring code is probably the most exciting part of AI today. LLMs are very well trained on on a lot of information about coding. They're very good at writing code, and writing in their very different ways depending on the framework and the platform that you're using. But at the end, teams, they really want to kind of write have code to be written the wrong way, because obviously you want code to be written that is actually very good and you can ship to production. So obviously, agentic coding tools, they're very good at this because they have all the context that's in your code base. And we will see soon how Codex is very great at this, able to understand everything that your own code base. So the context comes, and there's already the knowledge about all your code that you already written. But what about new code or new ideas, things that are not being written or designed yet, things that have just been designed but are waiting to be actually built? So that's kind of the importance of having the Figma MCP server. So our MCP, what it does, it actually can bring design and context to the agentic AI. So what I mean with that is you design something in a specific way, but probably the way you design, especially if you're relying on a design system, is reusing a bunch of components, and those components, they're already being built. So you want to inform the AI agent that you want to build something new based on the design that you have in Figma, but you have a much information that just based on the screenshot, probably the AI can do a good job at building something similar, but not reusing the components that you already have. That's why something like the Figma MCP really helps you to not just to build something, but to build something the really way that you want to do it. So that means actually you can actually ship code to production, and you have a good quality. And that's the beauty of the MCP server, and that's why it's so important to have something like that on top of having your code base context. And
Totally.
then
And on my side, I can dive in on Codex a little bit for those of you who might
go.
not know. So Codex is our coding agent at OpenAI. And the idea behind Codex is really to have an AI teammate at your disposal. Like we've seen such a rise in capabilities for AI coding that this is no longer just like outputting code. The idea is to have a teammate that's able to understand code, of course, write code, but also refactor, use components, check its own work. And that's kind of what we refer to as like agentic coding, the ability for the model to work on longer and more complex tasks, and also the ability to check its own work with tools. And so today, Codex can manifest into different ways, and we won't cover all of them today. You can use Codex in your terminal, like at the very simplistic UI with a very simple harness around the model, meaning like the access to the tools. We also have an IDE extension that you can use in your VS Code, your Cursor, your Windsurf, or your favorite IDE. We also have Codex in the cloud that we'll touch on maybe, and if you have questions about this. And you can also use like Codex in different ways, like using an SDK, for instance, in your GitHub Actions, but it's also like a teammate you can reach to on your Slack conversation, in your GitHub with code reviews, for instance. So we're gonna have this vision that Codex is your teammate that has like access to your context, and that's what we're gonna dive in today, especially with Figma and MCP. And also your context of your conversations and your projects and so on. So that's kind of the vision behind Codex. But I think the best way to show it is to have an actual demo.
Yeah.
And for that, Ricardo, you thought we could build something new today.
Yeah.
And so you sent me this design file. And so
Yes.
why don't you kind of cover a little bit what you had in mind?
Yeah. So we decided like for this demo to kind of like, do a classic workflow that you will have, you have a designer and developer like working together, like, building something together, and, you have the design side and then you have the coding side. So I'm acting like as a designer in this specific scenario. So yeah, as Roman was saying, I designed this and this is being like market ready for dev. So actually that means can be implemented by the engineer. And yeah, you can see like this is like a very like, standard design. We build like this fictional, like, tracking fitness app, and there's a bunch of things in there that are actually quite important to focus on because they really are something that get leveraged by the Figma MCP. So first of all, you can see there's a bunch of annotation like all around the design file, kind of like informing the developer about multiple things that the developer should like keep into consideration when building something. Because at the end, not always all the design is actually something visible. Here, for example, we have some annotation about how you should develop something, some annotation about accessibility. Those are things that are very important when you want to build something, but they're not necessarily like visible when you just look at a piece of design. So that's why we have those annotation there, and those annotation actually get passed as context via the MCP server. We can look at them later. Also, at the same time, in this like design file, there's other bunch of pages. Because this screen has been built based on like different components that we already have in our design system on the coding side. So for example, this one that Roman is showing right now, this is like a progress bar component that we built, and you can see like there's different variants. And Roman, if you inspect one of them, you can see so you can see actually you can get like a bunch of information. So those information are actually quite useful. Again, they can pass down as context via the MCP server. So what it means is actually then the agentic AI, when it's trying to build something based on the design, doesn't have just information about the design, so the way something look, but also has information about something was supposed to be built. So again, Roman, if you actually drill into the progress component here on the main page, yeah, we can see that, all this information is actually visible there. And, there's a bunch of actually code that get passed down. So that's Code Connect. And the beauty of Code Connect, yeah, for example, this one, you can see, go back to the progress, the one that you're drilling down, the progress one. So yeah, for example, yeah, so you can see actually that's code there. And that code is actually code that automatically it's about the implementation of the specific file in the specific scenario, instead of just being code about like the generic file. So for example, in this one, you can see if you copy and paste that code into your IDE, what you will get is exactly that specific variant of that progress bar component. So the one is actually 50% with the label and with the label shown. So this is very, very important because the agent doesn't have to guess more or less how you want to build something, but actually can reuse code that already exists. So that's very important. And we can see once we look at how the actually Codex use this kind of like information, how everything that we see here is getting passed via the MCP.
Cool. Yeah, actually, you know what?
Yeah,
I'm going to jump over to VS Code, and
yeah, let's go.
I gave us a little bit of a head start. And the first thing I want to show is like now that you imagine you have like Ricardo having this design file. How do you get the context over to VS Code? In fact, what I'm going to show you now is something we're about to ship in a few days. It's a new way to kind of like access and configure your MCP. So it's like much simpler. Now you can already do that today, by the way, but you have to have a command line or to edit a config file. We're now coming up with this new UI, so you can actually simply turn on any MCP like this. And all you'll have to do for your Figma is to simply click login. And as you click login, it will be brought to a screen to simply accept. And that's all you have to do. You can now go back to your design and your VS Code and you'll be logged in. And that's how you bring the context of Figma. And I'm going to walk you through the very first task here I sent to give us a little bit of a head start for this morning. But before we do so, you know what? Because I want this to be a live demo. Before I do that, I'm going to actually send a new task that we'll let run in the background. And so here, I'm going to type a little bit of a shortcut of a prompt here that I typed. And we want to try what Ricardo said about the progress here. So I'm going to send that task and we'll go back to it in a second. But in the meantime, take a look at this one. So this is probably the most interesting task of today. I gave Codex some context. Hey, like read the whole repository, because again, we're not starting quite from scratch on the demo. We're starting with a set of components that you, Ricardo, have built, right? And we don't want to just create code that's like random with like dependencies that the model would choose. We want to steer the model to use our design system. So you already have built a design system. And there, what we did is simply to say, hey, implement the home screen to look exactly like the Figma design using our design system. And what's beautiful here is like all I had to do was simply to click on the home page. And right there, you have this little bit of a copy button to like copy this exact URL. So that's exactly what I did. I just gave it a little bit of a twist on the prompt to say, hey, use our design system. And then in the next few minutes, what was very interesting is this. And I think that's where the magic really happens, right? It's the call to the Figma MCP. Do you want to voice over what happened there?
So it does here like, this basic, like, so in the Figma MCP, we have like multiple tools that you can use. If you just copy and paste like the prompt that we suggest in Figma, as Romain was showing, it just does the main one. So what it does, it calls like two tools. One is called design context. So it's bringing all the information from Figma and passing this information to the agentic AI. And also it takes a screenshot. It's very, very useful for the agentic AI. But yeah, the get design context, if you expand the one again, like there's a lot of like stuff in there that's actually get passed from Figma straight to the agent. And you can see like, now Roman is going through the code. There's a bunch of like code, but it's not just code that is getting generated like by the AI. There's still no AI involved in this. They're just like code that is coming from Figma, because like we have all these components that we have through, I was showing before, like Code Connect, for example. So Code Connect has a bunch of information, and all this information gets bring down to the agent. So all the code snippets, all the annotation. So the agent doesn't just start with a screenshot and then has to create a lot of code. Also has a lot of code already being given via Figma. So that's very, very important. And it means like, we have actually then an example of the file that gets created. And you can see like there's a bunch of components that the AI doesn't need to create, because those components already exist in the repository. As Ram was saying, like this repository has a bunch of like, design system components. Maybe usually you might have, this is like a specific, like maybe weird scenario that we're building the app in the same repository where we have also the design system components. Sometimes you have them in two like separate repository. But for example, at Figma, we've seen like many customers, they build out their own very small MCP server to expose their design system from one repository to another, where they're building actually an application. So you can do that. In this case, we have everything together But yeah, as I was saying, like all these components are getting actually reused and reimported instead of actually being written from scratch again. So that
Yeah,
means going back, I was saying like the code is already like production level code because this is code that you created, all these components that are being tailored in a specific way, considering all the settings, all the accessibility and everything. So you know actually AI understands, okay, the work has been done already. I just have to reuse the work to combine everything together to actually create a new page.
totally. And here we can see, so at the end of the task, it was kind of wrapping up everything, reusing the components and all of that. And it was like, okay, I'm done. And I wrote the homepage screen, I wrote the CSS according to it, but using all of the components that I've
Hmm.
seen. Now, before we actually look at what the results of that should be, we just launched this task. And this task just finished. And so this exact task, like as you can see, it's making changes on the homepage TSX that the first task had made. But this time, my task was about, hey, I want you to change today's progress on top with the date of today. I want you to make the subheading more motivational, and I want you to add some animation to simulate the progress because your screens had prepared like some progress bar that you showed us, but I want to make sure
Hmm.
this will actually work in real life. So these two tasks are finished. Let's take a look now at what that looks like. So if I go here, this is what we've got. So
Yeah.
now, not only did it implement your design pretty remarkably, frankly, when you compare the design to what we have, that second task also replaced that, to play around a little bit with the title, the heading. And it's now also showing us, if I refresh, kind of like animating the progress bar. And that's because it was able to find how you defined that component with the ability to reach multiple percentages. And so we have a feel for how the design will behave as the users actually use it. It's pretty
Yeah.
compelling.
Yeah, this is very cool. I think that's the where like all these tools really help the designer developer collaboration because as a designer I come up with initial design, then you can easily like build it with the help of something like Codex, but then together we can keep iterating and we can try different ideas. We can actually try something different, and then maybe when we come up with something that we like, then potentially you can go back into Figma and kind of like make like a better design based on this new interaction, and they go back into the code. Like this back and forth and this collaboration between designer and developers is really empowered by all these tools that we have now at our disposal. Yeah, that's very cool to see.
Yeah. So as you were just chatting, you might have seen I'm sending this new
Yeah.
prompt because when we go back to your design, you have not quite designed anything but the dashboard for now.
Yeah,
So
that's the initial design. Yes.
I see you had planned for a workout planner and a diary.
Mm-hmm.
Those don't exist just yet.
Yes.
But now that we have the foundation of a design that you created, and we also have a design system, I thought maybe we can start getting creative with Codex too. Like, what could Codex come up with as a starting point for us for, like, let's say, the workout planner? So what I've
Mm-hmm.
done here is that I just sent, hey, Ricardo has not worked on the workout planner yet. But hey, can you come up with something nice and implement it? But I want to make sure it matches the rest of the look and feel of the app. It should feel comprehensive, but it also should feel cohesive with the rest of the design. So this is completely live. I have literally no idea what Codex will come up with, but we'll let it run for a minute or two
Yeah.
and we'll see what happens. Currently, it's exploring some files. It's looking at like the components we have. It's also going to start making a plan as to what this planner could actually look like. And yeah, it's doing work. So we'll see in a few minutes, hopefully, what that looks like. One thing that I could also mention here is like when it comes to like creativity of Codex, one of my favorite features of Codex is something that we call best of n. And it's the idea that like the coding agent can take on a task for you, not just one time like I'm doing here today, but multiple times in parallel in the cloud. And if you're a designer that's kind of looking for inspiration,
Mm.
it can be a pretty compelling idea. So while this is working, I'm going to show you a second project I previously worked on. This was this idea for like the Wanderlust kind of travel app that I made. And I kind of wanted to have a new screen also for this one, but I wasn't too sure where to go. What I wanted was kind of a travel log where I could have like, some stats, some ideas. And I was like, you know what? I'm not sure which stats. I'm not sure like what they are, but they should be fun. They should be interesting. And here you see Codex in the cloud, like taking on different version of what that could look like. And it's kind of cool to see you can jump from one to the other and they quite look different, like they still fit some of this design. But for
Yeah.
instance, I could say, oh, version 1 is the most compelling to me, actually. Let me bring this one over and let's make sure it matches the rest. So that's
Mm,
another feature. As you think about design and creativity, sometimes you're in creative mode and you want to explore the possibilities, and best of n can be amazing. And sometimes you're in like, okay, I have my Figma design. I want to make it pixel perfect, but I also want to code to comply with my design system. So you
yeah,
kind of like, depending on where you are in the workflow, you can use both, which is nice.
yeah, very cool.
Let's take a look at what this is working on. It's still going. I think we'll give it a minute or two. See that now it made a plan. It's actually now that it's read everything, it's actually creating the new screen,
Mm,
which is really really cool. What we can do is like maybe I can pass it over to you if you have
yes,
some tips, and we'll come back
yeah,
to this task live when it's finished.
yes, let's do that. So let's just like recap a bit of the stuff that we just covered in this, like specifically like regarding like the Figma MCP. Like what we show you is like this like very cool scenario where you have like a bunch of components being designed in your like design file, and also a bunch of components existing also on the coding side. So they'll be connected to each other thanks to like Code Connect. By the way, regarding like Code Connect, we actually have two different like flavor of Code Connect. We have one called like CLI. That's the one we used in this scenario. That is very good at like creating like code snippets, and comes with like some files they have to create and then you have to publish. That's why it's called CLI. But also we have another version that is called like a Code Connect UI, and that's just like a kind of like a way to connect the components that already exist in your code base to the design, the elements that you have like in your Figma file, and you just can combine one to the other very easily in order to inform the other developers. For example, when they see a design of a button, they know they should use that specific component for the button. So just to recap, like the best way to kind of like make the most of the MCP and to actually get a good result. Like first of all, it's quite important that your design is designed like in a very like good way. So you have to think about pattern, you have to think about like design system, simply like simple stuff like name your layers and use auto layout. All these things are very very important because this is information then get passed via the MCP, and then like the agentic AI can like digest and really understand. Like this is very very important, and this is kind of like the scaffolding and the structure and the foundation of your design. If you want to build something like strong and resistant, has to come with like very good foundation. So those is kind of like the first like two tips, and it's the best way to understand how to kind of like understand the power of the MCP and then give as much information as possible to the MCP.
Yeah.
So then we also have like a couple of other like practical tips, and those are more about on kind of like the design file. So in the repository that we worked on, we had a bunch of like instruction guidelines that call in different ways depending on like which IDE you use. But those are very, very fundamental because, again, like the agent wants to kind of like digest as much knowledge as possible. Having something like this, what they are just like a markdown file, and then you just, almost like inform the agent about the structure of your repository. You inform the agent about how do you want to write files, things that you want to avoid, pitfalls. At the end, uh, being a developer is something that comes with much opinionating like opinions. So it's important that actually you share the way you want to do things with your agent, so the agent actually can build something that you're happy with. And then at the end, something that I showed you before when I were looking at the design file, annotation are very very important. They're not just like important for informing developers, when you're a designer and you're ready to hand over your file. But again, in a situation like this that we're leveraging AI and we're using the Figma MCP, they're so like incredibly important because again, the agent can read like the amount of information that you wrote, that you have in your annotation, and then combine that with a screenshot and with a code connect, can build a very cohesive like a bunch of information and instruction that then can build on top of that. So those are actually the best practical tips to make the most of the MCP. And
That's
yeah,
awesome.
let's
Yeah.
yeah.
And by the way, I love the fact that like when I use Code Connect, I love the fact that like I can rely on a design file that's really well
Mm,
thought through by a designer, but also have a screenshot of the work. And I think like when you think about how AI models work for coding, this is how they get the best power because they get the real source of the design that the designer has come up with, but they also get a visual screenshot of what the output should look like. And so then the
mm,
model can actually check the screenshot, and if the result is not quite matching yet, that helped the model actually take a second or a third revision for it until it gets the right results. So it's a really cool thing to do versus just passing a PNG file, right, to implement.
Yes, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, for
let's take a
sure.
look at what's happening here. It sounds like it's working. Everything has been, let's see, it's like still working actually. It's still working on the workout planner. It sounds like it's very, very comprehensive on this one.
Okay.
Let's see if it's making any progress that I can already see. Not quite yet. We'll get back to it. But I think like I was using like GPT 5.1 Codex Max High. So I
Oh,
think
so
like
he's
I
doing a
wanted to
lot of
make it very,
thinking.
very
Yeah,
good.
nice.
But
Yeah,
it's cool. Yeah.
let's while it goes, let's try to let's start the Q&A, and
Yeah.
then
Happy to take any
yeah,
questions.
cool. Let's do some questions, and then just before we wrap up, we can go back and check like the
For sure.
result. So I can see like we actually have a bunch of questions. Thank you everyone for writing your questions. I'm going to actually check them, and maybe we can maybe combine some of them together. So
Yep.
few people are asking, how is Codex different from Copilot when it comes to generating AI code from Figma Design? And maybe you can say more about this. Someone else is asking, I'm new to AI. What's the difference between using the VS Code Copilot chat for tasks compared to Codex AI? Is the Codex is faster than Copilot? So maybe you can answer about that. Like, what's the difference between Codex and Copilot and the other tools, especially when we're talking about, implementing and generating UI code from a Figma design?
Yeah, totally. I think this is a great question. And I think like it is interesting to see like there are many layers here. First of all, I think it comes down to the model, right? I think we are pushing the frontier of model capabilities for coding specifically. And we've done that with like, GPT 5.1 Codex Max and as of yesterday, 5.2 also. And the idea for these models is that they can take on like larger and larger tasks. We want them to be able to work for like not just minutes, but potentially hours at a time. And on top of the model, there's also a harness. And the harness is this idea that like we want to optimize for the access to tools, right? We know that like when you're writing software or you're implementing design, you're kind of living in an ecosystem. You want to make sure that like, your designs are on Figma, but your tasks may be on Linear. And you want to make sure the model has access to tools to check its own work. It could be like Playwright to take screenshots. It could be like, bash command files to read and like find the right places in the repository. And that's kind of what makes Codex agentic. And then on top of that, there's like the different surfaces where it manifests, like you can use a VS Code extension, for instance, to use Codex from there, as I'm doing now for this morning demo. But, if your favorite IDE is Cursor, or if your favorite IDE is like Windsurf, for instance, you can still leverage the Codex models, for your task from these IDEs. And so in terms of how it's different from Copilot, I would like to think about it like think a bit about your AI teammate, like a coding teammate that's able to be really tackling complex problems and exhibit this like kind of agentic behavior to check its work and go deep on tasks. And by the way, like I've been blown away myself. Like I've seen Codex work for like more than 7 hours on one big refactoring, for instance. And at the end of it, it was like, I'm done, and everything was correct. And so I
Wow.
think it completely changed my mind as to where AI coding is. Like I think many of us still have the conception that AI coding is about like, oh, I'm giving a prompt and it's writing code. But in fact, now it's much more than that. Like writing code is a small part of it. It's also understanding the code, understanding your components, your design system, the context, fetching the context from your Slack conversation or your Figma files. All of that, I think, makes like the true agentic coding work.
Yeah, that's very cool. I think that's the beauty of like tools like Codex. They actually are able to be a proper engineer. An engineer is not just something who writes code. An engineer is something that is able to think like an engineer, so able
Yeah,
to understand all the context, understand all the different scenarios, think about all the edge cases and stuff like that. Because we all both know, like being an engineer is not just writing code. Actually, probably the writing code
absolutely.
is the easier part in a way. Like everything around it is the complicated part. So having the ability to actually be able to think about everything, it's very, very impressive. So
Yeah.
there's another actually question that's specific about Codex. So I'm going to read out to you. So the question says, in case where a design is optimized for visual output, but cut corners in terms of component reusability or technical cleanliness, how does Codex behave? Does it prioritize strict fidelity to the design, or does it attempt to infer and produce a more technical sound implementation?
That's a great question. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that's like very steerable, depending on what your needs are. So, like when you work on Figma design, it's pretty rare that you start from scratch. Like most of the time, you're already operating on a product, you're maybe adding features, changing features. You may or may not have a design systems, you may or may not have existing dependencies. Maybe the design is not quite complete. And so if you let the model like implement the design without any kind of guidance, you may have different kind of results. But I think that's
Mm,
where Agents MD, for instance, can really come into play. So we came up with Agents MD, and now many, many tools in the industry have adopted the same format, which is great. You can think of it as a README, but for your AI agent. And so, for instance, you can decide, hey, if I'm giving you a Figma mockup, and if you realize it's not quite finished, well, I want you to add new dependencies if you need, or no, I don't want you to add any new dependencies. And I want you to rely on our design system only. And if you're missing components, tell me. You can actually steer your AI coding agent this way. And it's a very powerful tool. I'm using it a lot. And I think many of us at OpenAI are using Agents MD in that way. I think we're approaching 100 different Agents MD file in our monorepo at OpenAI. Given we have multiple services, multiple products, we steer our Codex agent to behave the right way per project by giving it specific instructions. So I think that can be a cool tool for designers too.
yeah, that's very cool, actually. Wow. So I'm going to check some more few questions. We still have time. So let's see this one. I think this is more about Figma. So how to make the AI agent refer our custom React design system library and generate code from the Figma design? Is there something other than just code context that we have to do? So this about more like how you connect the design to code so the agent understand the connection. So that's mainly like the kind of like the benefit that Code Connect brings. So with Code Connect, it's something that actually you do yourself. So you just connect what you have in your code to what you have in the design. And thanks to that, you actually are able to pass all this information to the agent. So that's the way you do it. Like it's just a simple connection that you do. And once you do that, the connection is already done and it stays there in Figma, by the way. So you don't have to do the connection all the time. And the connection also lives for other engineers or other designers. They actually access the same Figma design file. So you have to do the connection once and anyone can benefit from the connection. So that's very cool. Obviously, when you add a new component, you have to probably will create the code for the component and then do the connection again. And you want to keep the connection always up to date, but that's the best way. Someone else also asked something about this kind of like bring context. So is the Figma context stored or summarized as an MD file in the IDE or double check its understanding? So it is not. What you can do, what we're showing you in the demo, Roman was going through the tool response. So you can see everything in there, like all the information that you pass into the agent, it's in there. At the same time, if you want to like double check before what kind of information the MCP has and is going to pass to the agent, we have actually multiple tools in the Figma MCP. For example, we have one is called get variable defs. So it returns all the variable definitions and style that you use in your Figma selection. So you can use that to find out, what kind of information like the MCP has about your variables. We also have another tool called a get code connect map. So for your selection, you can see the connection already there. So you can double check actually if the connection is correct. We have another tool is called create design system rules. There's another cool one that actually you can ask AI to kind of query the Figma MCP server, and then what will get returned is actually all the information in your repository about your design system. That can be also very useful if you want to kind of scaffold and start your instruction file, because sometimes it's actually might be difficult to understand how you want to structure the files. Using the tool, the create design system rules, you can get a bunch of information from Figma, and then you can use that to start your instruction markdown file, for example. So there's multiple ways. What I would suggest, experiment with the different tools that we have in the Figma MCP server, and then you can actually extract a lot of information that then actually get passed to the agent using those.
By the way, Ricardo, before we move
Yeah.
on to the next question, I just got back to VS Code. It sounds like
Oh,
it's
cool.
finished our workout screen, so I have no idea what it looks like yet. But it sounds like it made a new planner experience with a shared header, a weekly focus, live metrics, readiness, progress bar, a weekly schedule, a code strategy. it wrote quite a bit of code, and we have these new like components that have been
Okay,
written.
cool.
Once again, it's using
Yeah,
all of the
important.
components of your system.
Yeah,
So let's take a look. Honestly, I have no idea what it looks like. Hey, there we go.
yeah,
Workout planner. This is the
yeah.
week. Build a balance block without sacrificing recovery. Look at this. This is very, very good. Like again, like we did not start with any design at all.
No,
We only told the model, come up with something creative, but make sure it's consistent with the rest of the design. And it reused all of your design system.
yeah.
Pretty cool. I mean, I'm not sure you would have come up with this exact layout. Maybe you had better ideas in mind, but it's a pretty cool place to get started.
Yeah, it's quite nice to see a bunch of like components getting reused. Even the progress bar, it's there on
Yeah,
on the right. It's kind of like changed a bit, but you can see it's actually using exactly the same component. So that's
pretty
pretty
cool.
cool. It's using some of the cards that already exist in the design system. It's using like the button, also the theme. So all the tokens are used correctly in terms of like the colors and the different like background, border color, and everything. So yeah, that's pretty cool actually.
Yeah, and then of course
Yeah.
you can keep iterating on this. If we had used Codex in the cloud, we could have seen 4 different versions at the time instead of one. So that's another way to kind of get the creative juice going. But anyway, that was kind of cool. We can go back to questions.
Yeah, I'm actually, yeah, with a few minutes left. Let's try to answer some other. Let's see. Okay, someone is asking, all of these design guidelines are key both for Figma MCP and Figma Make or just MCP? Okay, that's interesting. So we haven't covered Figma Make, but Figma Make is our own like prototyping tool that we have at Figma. If you want to start from zero, just prompt and come up with some new ideas and new design, actually interactive design. So actually there's code behind it. You can do that. So the question is about if all design guidelines are actually can be useful also for Figma Make. The answer is like yes, because especially like recently we in Figma Make you're allowed to use like export kind of like your design you have in Figma and then actually import it in Figma Make. So if you prompt something, you don't start from zero, but actually you start to build something from the design that already exists. So that's very useful. So that means the work that you do in Figma can be used both in then your IDE and in Codex, but also in Figma Make. At the same time, we have an MCP in Figma Make, so you can export something from Figma Make into, for example, Codex. So maybe you don't start from Figma Design at all. You start from Figma Make, you prompt and you prototype there initially very quickly, and then you export that one via the MCP into Codex, and then you continue to iterate in Codex and leverage the power of Codex. At the same time, actually, you can go to Figma Make into Figma Design, again using like a connection. So the beauty and also like what Roman was saying before, like you can start at any time and use all these tools and go back and forth. Sometimes you start from very structured design and then you want to move straight to code. Sometimes you start from an idea and then maybe you will prompt in Figma Make or you start in Codex. And sometimes maybe you start in code and then you want to go back into Figma Design. You can do that. Like what you have to bring is just ideas, and then all those tools can really help you. And you can kind of like mix and combine them together. Also based on like who are the people working with you. If you have maybe designer and developers, maybe the designer is able to start the design in kind of like Figma Design because it's very good at design. Maybe if you start on your own as a developer, maybe you're not very good at design. Maybe you start straight in Codex and then you go into Figma Make into Figma Design after once the designer is on board. Like there's a way different ways that you can actually decide how to use this workflow and which tool to use and in which order you want to use them.
Yeah, and I think what I'm really excited about in this new world is that it's kind of blurring the lines between what a designer and what an engineer actually does. Like I think what I love the most about Codex with the Figma MCP is that now if you're a designer, you're getting extra superpowers. Like,
Hmm.
no reason not to build, like you can actually pretty rapidly build a prototype, actually build a real product, as opposed to just like waiting for the engineer to like be available to implement your design like we would have done like maybe a few years ago. And so
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this like extra superpower for designers that this is giving them.
Yeah, it is very cool. Let's do a couple more. We still have a bit of time. So someone is asking about annotations. What are annotations? Can you elaborate? So as I was showing like during the design, so annotation is what you see like there, like all this like box with actual information in there. Those are something that, in ideal workflow, your designer actually add them to the design file. So that means you as a developer or your agent, if you're using the MCP, is able to understand and read and process this information that comes in the annotation. So we think annotation is the best way to, again, as I was saying before, to inform your engineer or your agent about something that is not actually visually like visible and noticeable. Again, something about accessibility. Maybe you want to build something in a specific way and you want to think how it should look in, different devices and stuff like that. Those are things that won't be visible, but they actually are important that you have knowledge about those. And annotation is the best way to actually describe them and implement them. Also, similar to that, someone, I think it was the same person, yeah, is asking, are there any standards for the design to make it AI compatible? I think that's a very good question, and that's what I was mentioning before in terms of like the practical tips. Um, Obviously, AI is very capable now of, being able to generate almost everything. But obviously, if you want to have something that's very close to what you have in mind and your foundation, it's quite important that to build your design with very strong foundation. So what I mentioned before was like, use like, reuse components, use auto layouts, add variables or connect into variables, name your layers, just have like a Figma file that's very good designed and implemented Figma file, something that you pass to another designer. The other designer is able to understand actually what it's in the design file, because at the end, like, the agent is just a colleague that helps you. So if you build something that a colleague is not able to understand, probably I is not able to understand it. So that's kind of like the best recommendation. Like, keep your design file very clean and very organized, and think about all the different stuff that you can use in order to have something as reusable as possible. Let's see. There's another one. Let me see if actually there's something more about Codex, because there's some interesting stuff in here. Let's have a look. Um, okay, maybe we can go through this again. Someone is asking, let's go. Hmm. Okay, so someone is asking like the about the context that actually is coming from the MCP. So if you go back into Codex, and we can
Yep.
expand again
Yep.
the the tool that I get called.
Yeah. Let's go back to the first task where
Yes,
we called the Figma MCP. So
yes.
here, right there, we had the screenshot. That
Screenshot,
was
yeah,
the end result we wanted, but more
yeah.
importantly, we have the design
Yeah.
context.
So yeah, that's the context is coming from the MCP. So you can
Yeah.
see there's like almost like three, like multiple section. So there is all the code snippets. So that means all the code that I was showing before in Figma
Yep.
is actually passed. There's also the tokens that get used, and this is quite important because those are actually the coding tokens, not the variable in Figma. Usually they have different syntax. There's also a bunch of, if you're SVG, are also passed down,
Yep.
and also the instruction and the guidelines are also passed down. So that means like there's not just code that the AI agent has knowledge of, but also how to use the code, how to connect the code to other bits. So all this stuff is all the stuff that comes from the MCP. Again, this is not AI generated. This is knowledge that is coming from Figma, and Figma gives to the agent to then
Yeah.
elaborate and create something on top of that.
Yeah, and for
So
instance, what I found interesting here, just looking at the context, is that like the exact font, for instance, to be used in which weight and everything. Like
yeah,
if you were just passing a screenshot, the model could try to guess if it's like an Helvetica style font or something, but may not have access to the precise font. But here, it's actually giving the indication of what that should be. And same for
yeah,
kind of all the components, the annotations you mentioned. I saw the comment you had about the max width being like 80 pixels, and I
yeah,
think that's super useful for
yeah,
the model to actually get it right.
yeah.
Yeah, the context is really useful here.
Yeah, and what you were saying about the fonts and everything, you can see like, the actual CSS tokens are in there
Yep.
because everything was matched between the variables in Figma and the tokens in code. So that means actually instead of like the agent only being informed about the variables that are used in Figma, is also actually informed about the tokens that are be used
Yeah.
as CSS tokens. So
Yeah.
that means doesn't need to have the connection. Okay, this, font weight corresponds to these like CSS variables. It already has the connection in there, so you can see when it writes the CSS, actually there's not much like there's not many hard coded values. Almost everything is actually CSS variables, and it comes from the tokens.
Yep.
So we have maybe time for one more question. Let's see. Let's try to pick one that we haven't answered yet. I'm going to go at the bottom. Um, Okay, someone is asking, is Codex well supported for mobile app code, let's say Flutter?
Yeah, I mean, like, please try on your own. I haven't tried Flutter myself, but I've built iOS apps in Swift UI and Swift, and it was fabulous. I think we um, we could probably do even better for the overall developer experience, given like when you're working on web, what's very nice is that like you have your server auto reloading and everything. So in this case, I never even had to reload when this task finished because it just happened automatically. I think you still have to have like Xcode to like compile your app and actually
Mm,
preview it in the simulator. But for the actual kind of code understanding, writing the code, implementing a design, taking a Figma mockup and turning that into Swift UI, also super, super compelling. And so, yeah, please try it. I think for Flutter, I have not tried, but it should be working flawlessly. And yesterday, also, when we launched GPT 5.2, it's still like one more time kind of pushing the frontier as what the front end design engineering can accomplish, even on like physics, 3D rendering of sorts. So that could be useful for certain kinds of apps. But yeah, curious to have your feedback. It should work really well.
yeah, that's cool. Actually, because Flutter was mentioned, something I forgot to mention, like, Code Connect is actually compatible with like multiple frameworks. Like in the example, we have like a React code base, but also we support like web components. So that means, Angular and Vue and everything else. And
Nice.
also on mobile, we support like Swift UI and Jetpack Compose for kind of like, language that we don't support like directly, like Flutter, for example. We have also like a parserless option. So actually you can create like your own way to actually parse whatever language you're using to convert it in something that actually can be used to do a Code Connect connection. So I just want to mention
Amazing.
that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that
let's,
dev day
yeah.
I built. At dev day I even built an app in React Native using
Cool.
using Codex, and I even included the Codex SDK inside, which is kind of a promising future also. But the idea that you can turn an app into something that morphs in the future based on user preferences. You can imagine like adaptable software almost. So I used Codex to build this React Native app, and in zero shot came up with something very compelling.
Yeah, that's very impressive. Okay, let's, I think almost at time. Let's wrap up and
Yeah.
just like to, just to close everything, like here a bunch of resources, like very simple, you can check out actually our MCP catalog. Now we're showing the MCP server with Codex, but obviously we are compatible and they're easy to add to any other like IDE and any other like, like agentic AI coding tool. So we are almost like everywhere.
Yeah. And on the Codex side, I think the best place to get started is openai.com/Codex. As I mentioned at the beginning, you have multiple surfaces to use Codex with, but I presume for most of you watching who has like design affinity or you even like full-time designers, I imagine the IDE extension or Codex Cloud, both of them are probably the best place to get started. And so you can simply download the IDE extension in your favorite IDE, whether it's VS Code, Windsurf, Cursor. And it's also, by the way, I didn't mention it, but it's like basically part of your ChatGPT subscription. So all you have to do is you log in with ChatGPT and you have Codex built in. And then the second step is simply to connect your Figma MCP. And we have docs to do so, just like one command line or this new UI I showed you a sneak preview of that's coming next week. So
That's
that'll make
very cool.
that'll make the connection even simpler. Wanted to give you a preview today.
Very nice. And I guess just last thing, like just a bit like let's talk about like our Figma conference. So Config is happening again next year, and as you can see, it's happening in San Francisco, like June 23rd to 25th. And then if you want, like tickets are on sale, and it's a very cool conference. And just go to Figma config.figma.com, and you can just buy your ticket.
Yeah,
And
and I hope by then we'll have many, many more announcements to do together and hopefully more demos. I'm sure with the
yeah, for
progress
sure.
of AI coding and how
Yes.
MCP is also progressing, I'm sure this feels like we have a ton of time to build new things. So hope to see you there also.
Yeah, for sure. There would be way more things to show and way more thing like to think about and better way to actually work all together and actually ship great product. So yeah, for sure.
Amazing. Well,
Okay,
thank you
cool.
so much, Ricardo, for hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you
That
so
was a
much,
pleasure.
everyone, for tuning in and for watching. Really, really excited for this agentic AI coding future with Codex and Figma combined. So, yeah, excited to see what you build.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. That was very enjoyable. Thank you, Roman, for like being here with us. I think was great. We have very good questions, and yeah, let's continue building stuff and working together.